take a few minutes to go over the grading notes. You have a copy of this, but I wanted to explain to you what I do when I grade. First of all, the purpose of this first paper was a literacy memoir, so it was to have been a story with a point, and the conclusion should have provided an insight. You can go back to the essay website to get information about memoirs, narratives, and the parts of the essay. Let me give you that web address. That web address, it is a secure site, sites.google.com, site, singular, my initials, last name, and then the words "the essay" will take you to that. You can find information, general and specific, about writing. I provide this as a source for you to go back to at any point in time. Errors in grammar and mechanics, I try to use a colored font in the text, that is where the error occurs, or I use the comment box with the rule number. It will be off to the side. And in order to use a comment box, I use review, and then it inserts a comment box. If I do it on one computer, the box is plain. If I do it on another one, it includes my initials. So know that if you see SCP and a number, that is simply a part of the comment box and not intended as a rule number, something that has confused students in the past. If I made a typographical error, then it may not make sense. So your rule number should be a letter and a number and maybe a second letter. If that's not the case, then copy and paste the information, send it to me, and I'll clarify. Please accept my apologies if I did that and didn't catch it in time. If I have added words or punctuation, I use brackets, and that is standard procedure, but that way it lets you see where I've put things in. I also try to use a colored font there. I may be offering a suggestion or clarifying. I may put a question mark after a word to indicate that your meaning may be clearer if you used this other word. If you mean what you say what you mean, and my suggestion you feel like is off base, then certainly you do not have to, you don't have to take that as a change, but it's to offer you an opportunity to consider what else might work in that particular situation. If I use the word consider, do the same thing. It's seeking to clarify, and always clarity is what we're working toward and for. If I've marked through something, I mean to delete it. And again, it may be in reconstructing a sentence, showing you how you could use a dependent clause to communicate meaning, or showing how you could construct a sentence differently to correct an error. If I can do it easily, I typically do it, but if it takes more than just a few minutes, I may just move on and simply mark the error. But I do try to show you what you need to do instead. When I use combine, it means combine those two sentences on either side. It may have to do with sentence structure. It may be because you've begun a sentence with a coordinating conjunction. Realize that I'm showing you that you could combine them by making one a clause, a phrase, and a positive, that you can communicate your ideas more effectively and more concisely sometimes by combining ideas. Connect indicates that there's a gap. That gap is where a relationship is not established. You can establish that relationship in a number of ways. If you'll go back to the Integrity lecture on the paragraph, you can see how a variety of ways that you can use to connect ideas, using pronouns, making other references, repeating keywords, beginning with a given and adding something new, and then always sentence structure allows you to show how ideas are related to one another. If there's a transition needed between paragraphs, I may indicate that, and I may have indicated a new paragraph. In memoirs particularly, and if you have dialogue, a paragraph can serve as a transitional element because it gives your reader just a second or two to catch up or to shift gears. Your thesis should always be the last sentence of your introductory paragraph. I know that there are other ways that you can do it, but in a freshman composition class, we put it in that accepted location so that everybody's on the same page, so that I know that you have stated your thesis and that I can find it in this particular place. Students often have questions about the rubric. The rubric is a departmental rubric. I use it because that was the department's recommendation. These are considered to be minimum requirements, but I'm going to talk to you specifically about about the way to interpret what I have marked. First, look at the ASA and see what constitutes an ASA. And then, if it's not marked in the ASA, look and see where it is marked or what is marked instead. And we're going to look at the rubric for just a second. This is the grading rubric that I use. Notice the ASA, that it obviously fulfills the designated purpose or mode. And in this case, it obviously was a literacy memoir, a story that made a point about literacy, reading, writing, learning to do one of those things, teaching relative to one of those things. A B would be that it fulfills its designated purpose or mode, but that there may be a little bit of a question about whether it was a story that made a point or whether or not it was really centered on literacy. A CD paper attempts to fulfill that mode, and some of you gave me informational essays, expository essays, instead of a literacy memoir, and so I counted that because you did write about literacy, but it was not a memoir. So you were attempting to fulfill the purpose. You didn't meet the mode requirement, though. The next thing I want you to look at is structure. An ASA is well organized. The introduction has an interesting lead-in, that hook. There is a well-developed thesis. The body supports the thesis with specific, relevant details. They are in a logical order. The relationship between ideas, the coherence is clear. The relationship between paragraphs is clear. And the conclusion ties things up neatly and nicely and lets the reader see where you are, what you meant, what you learned in this case. Sentence variety shows some sophistication. As a general rule, I do some sentence variety, but can improve, particularly if there are a number of errors. Is it interesting? Does it show a depth of thought or some good thought? Are the ideas clearly expressed with examples, or are they mostly clear, or are they unclear? Are there things that you need to give examples for? Is the tone appropriate? Back to word choice. Did you choose appropriate words? Did you eliminate contractions? Did you eliminate second-person pronouns? Right now, I count those here, but for some instructors, using the pronoun you is an F error. So be aware of that and begin now to make the change so that you won't have that problem. Does it meet MLA standards? Are there extra spaces after the paragraph? If you'll notice, when we set paragraphing, here we're single spaced and our spacing is at 0, both before and after the paragraph. Some of you are failing to make this correction. The default setting has extra space there, so you may have to go in and reset that. You can use this to indent the first line of your paragraph, and when you do citations, bibliographical citations, you use hanging for your paragraph indentation. The other thing that you need to be aware of is that the file name format that I have asked for, I count as MLA formatting. But notice that B is if I think you tried. But the errors with paragraph formatting you need to correct. You need to make sure your paper is double spaced. You need to make sure that you have a header. Those are things that are merely following directions. And there's no reason why those errors should persist in your paper. As a general rule, as the year goes along, my philosophy or position is that you can make no better than the block in which you have elements marked. So if you continue to make the number of grammatical and mechanical errors that would make your paper be in the DF classification, then the highest you can make is a 69. So we want to correct those errors, and that's why I don't mark off initially for these errors, because I want to give you an opportunity to correct them. But if you have a paper that has everything else up here, if it's an A paper in all regards except for mechanics and grammar and usage, then you need to review the rules and make sure that you can make those corrections. I've given you access to the Writer's Reference website so that you can go in and do exercises and see how sentences look. But my belief and research shows that the best way to learn the rules and how to apply them is to apply them in your own writing. When I grade your paper, I come in and I mark the part that I believe applies to your paper. So did you fulfill the designated purpose or mode? Do you have an introduction with an interesting lead-in and a well-developed paragraph? Does your conclusion bring the paper to a satisfying finish? Are there problems with coherence? Are there a couple of places where I put connect? I would have marked a B. If there are more than a couple of places where there are problems with coherence, then I may mark the C paper. It depends on the whole paper. If everything else is good and there are 2 or 3 errors, but everything else is A, it still may be marked. But it's so that you're aware. So when I look back through your paper and I see connect or transitions, then that means that I marked something other than an A paper. Do you have ideas clearly expressed with examples? If so, I mark that. If there are places where you don't develop ideas, then that's where I go. So these are the things I look for. Notice again, grammar and mechanics. 4 or more, those are the G errors, the major errors. 6 or more are the other errors, the punctuation, sentence structure, word choice. But if you have multiple mistakes, it's distracting. So your goal is to have as few mistakes as possible. Now, I know that some of you are discouraged because you were in the D category with regard to grammar, mechanics, and usage. But I assure you that you are not the exception. If you have great ideas, if you've got a well-developed essay that adheres to the standards of structure, and you have interesting content, and you have communicated a conclusion that draws your reader in, those are things that, to me, are more important than grammar and mechanics. However, we cannot ignore the rules. I use sports metaphors. You can be a really great player, but if you break the rules, there are penalties. So be aware of the fact. What you have to do is look at the rule, see how it applies to your paper so that you can make necessary corrections and stop making those errors. If you don't understand how to apply the rules to your paper, please ask. I'll be glad to help. With regard to those errors, your first essay, grading is based on content and organization. There is not a penalty for grammar and mechanics, but those penalties do start occurring later. I will require reviews on later papers. However, if you go ahead and complete that review now, you're going to have fewer errors to correct later on. And when I do have you correct errors later on, I either give you a block amount, that is a total number of points for the errors corrected, or you can earn half of the credit back in the errors that you made. So, if you made errors in this paper, that put you in that D paper range, then you would be able to earn approximately 10 points back. So instead of having a D, you would have a C plus paper. But the goal is for you not to have those errors. So this is what I suggest you do. These are corrections that you're to use. 1, use the Hacker Text and or the essay website. Look at the errors that you have marked. I have there is a list of errors by name that are keyed. That list is keyed to the Hacker Text, so you can go in and see the rule numbers. I've provided lectures, but you can pull up those rules online. You don't have to have the Hacker Text to be able to look the rules up as long as you know how the rule applies to your paper. Look at the errors you made. See if you understand how to correct them. And if you don't, please make sure that you ask. Finally, look at the things that I marked as far as structure and content. Do you understand what I mean by coherence or transitions? Do you understand what I mean by developing an idea? Look back at the paragraph, look back at the essay as a whole, but primarily the paragraph, to see if you can understand how to correct it. And if not, then please ask. Again, the goal of the review is to allow you to see how you're making errors and what you need to do to correct them. Early in the semester, one of the lectures that I provided was on reflective practice. This is reflective practice. You identify the error, you determine how to correct the error in your own work so that you can move forward making that correction and not continuing to make the same error. Even though I went over rules when I discussed the Hacker Text and the Integrity video, I'd like for you to remember that these are some errors that you really need to pay attention to. The first 3 that I haven't read are pretty much errors that I consider no excuse. That is, there's no reason why you can't make these corrections. First of all, you may not use the second person pronoun you. It's considered to be informal. It is not acceptable in academic writing, and for some instructors, it is an F error, which means when they get to that first you, they draw a line across the paper, write an F, and that is your grade. You may use the Control F function. That is Control F. And you have a search function. So I can put the word you in there, and it's going to tell me every place in the paper that I have the word you. When I do that, I can go back and make corrections. So if it's an oversight, I understand. However, you have this option. You can do the same thing to search for apostrophes, to search for indefinite pronouns, so that you can make sure that you make the corrections you need to. Contractions are considered informal. They are not acceptable in academic writing. Numerals, if it requires 3 or more words, you get to use numerals. If it can be said in 2 or fewer words, 100, then you use words. There are some obvious exceptions. If we're talking about time, dates, those things use conventional formatting. For verb tenses, I discussed briefly with you about verb tenses. You can also find on the essay website the link to the table of English tenses, and it helps you to see when to use particular verb tenses. The error that I see most frequently, or the question that I have most frequently with regard to verb tenses, is the past tense versus the conditional simple, that is, that would construction. The subjunctive mood we use in if-then constructions, and we use what we consider to be a plural pronoun. If-then, if I'm going to get home this afternoon, if he, I'm sorry, no example here. Parallelism, you can go to the discussion of parallelism on the essay website, or you can go to the OWL at Purdue. Parallelism means that you are showing equal value by putting groups of words in the same grammatical structure. The pronoun it, make sure it has a clear antecedent. This is one error that we often see. Make sure that indefinite pronouns are treated as singular. It is sometimes used as a subject, and it is considered to be a weak subject. There is a discussion of this at a couple of websites, at a couple of locations. Go to those and read. I encourage you to use it as little as possible. Finally, plague words. There is a reference, and our using being instead of because, as in being that. We want to use because or another conjunction rather than that be form, that form of the verb be. And finally, sentence structure. Try not to depend too much on compound sentences. If you're linking your ideas with and, but, so, yet, then see if you can create sentences that are more complex. One idea dependent on another instead of them all being of equal value. Coordinating conjunctions connect, so they typically do not begin sentences, particularly in academic writing. And finally, to correct run-on sentences. That's two groups, that is a group of words pretending to be one sentence when it's actually two or more. You can use a period, a comma and a conjunction, a semicolon and a conjunction, a colon, or you can revise the sentence to correct the run-on.